affecting the rate of transpiration. In this video, we are going to discuss the structural and physiological factors that either speed up the rate of transpiration or slow it down. Let's dive in. Number one, thickness of the cuticle. So the cuticle is a waxy waterproof layer that is found on the upper and lower epidermis of the leaf. Now what happens is that by being waterproof, the cuticle reduces the amount of water that is lost by the plants to the atmosphere. So essentially what the cuticle does is that it reduces the amount of water that is lost, but it doesn't completely stop it. Now you find that plants that are found in arid areas are going to have different adaptations to those that are found in wet areas or in aquatic areas. And the reason for this is these two different types of plants have different conditions and therefore different needs. Let me give an example. If you have a plant that is growing in the desert, it has a problem in terms of water. It doesn't have enough water. So it's going to have adaptations that will enable it to conserve as much water as possible. How will it do so with regards to transpiration? It's going to have certain structures that ensure that the amount of water that is lost through transpiration is as little as possible. Now, when it comes to plants that are found in aquatic areas, for example, plants that are found in water bodies and such, they have the exact opposite problem. And that is they have too much water and they need to get rid of this excess water. So in such cases, you're going to have adaptations that ensure that these plants lose as much water as possible, and therefore they need to come up with ways to speed up the rate of transpiration. So when it comes to the conditions or to the factors that affect transpiration, I'm going to explain each and then tell you what are the adaptations that are found in aquatic plants and those that are found in dry areas. Now let's continue with where we had left off, cuticle. So you find that plants that grow in areas that are arid, such as in the deserts and so on, tend to have a thicker layer of cuticle. This simply means that if they have a thicker layer of cuticle, the amount of water that they lose to the surrounding is going to be less. So how does this equate to the rate of transpiration? They have low rates of transpiration. So the thicker the cuticle, the less the amount of water that is lost, and therefore the lower the rate of transpiration. Now plants that grow in aquatic areas, as mentioned before, they have the opposite problem to this. So they need to get rid of excess water. So how do they do this? Now you'll find that plants that grow in aquatic area will either have a very thin cuticle or no cuticle at all. And the reason for this is so as to encourage as much water loss as possible through transpiration. Why? In order to get rid of the excess water. Now, students, one thing I want to mention is this. When you are asked about factors or structural factors that affect transpiration, don't put your point as cuticle. That is wrong. You have to mention it as thickness of the cuticle. Now, moving on to the next one, stomata. Now, we mentioned stomata in the first part of our video. These are openings that are found on the surface of the leaf, on the upper and lower epidermis of the leaf. When stomata are open, they allow gaseous exchange to take place, but at the same time, they allow water vapor to be lost to the surrounding through transpiration. Now, when it comes to arid plants, you find that such plants need to conserve water. So what are the adaptations when it comes to stomata? So I'm going to put it in the following three. We are going to talk about the number of stomata. We are going to discuss the size of the stomata and the location of the stomata. So let's start with the number and size. Plants that grow in areas that have scarcity of water are going to have fewer stomata that are smaller in size. And this, of course, is just common sense. Why? To reduce the amount of water vapor that is lost through transpiration. Now, what about the location? When it comes to the location, stomata can be found either on the upper surface of the leaf or the lower surface of the leaf. But you'll note that in most plants, stomata are usually located on the lower surface of the leaf. And the reason for this is because when they are located on the lower surface, they can perform gaseous exchange, but at the same time, they are a bit sheltered from the environmental conditions such as the sun. And therefore, the amount of transpiration will be less. So coming back to our desert plants, plants that grow in deserts, semi-deserts and so on, will have stomata that are located mostly on the lower surface. Why? To reduce their exposure to environmental conditions, therefore reducing the rate of transpiration and conserving water. So what about plants that are found in aquatic areas or wet areas? Number one, they're going to have a lot of stomata, and the stomata are going to be larger in size. Why? Because they need to maximize loss of water through transpiration in order to get rid of the excess water. Now, what about the location? Such plants usually have more stomata located on the upper surface compared to the lower surface. Again, we are coming back to the same point that the reason for this is so that they can get rid of the excess water through transpiration. So they are going to have higher rates of transpiration as compared to those plants that live in the deserts or that are found in the deserts. Now, one thing I'd like to make a note of is this. Sunken stomata. Now, this is a phenomenon that is found in plants that grow in areas of water scarcity. So, sunken stomata are simply stomata that are found below the leaf surface. They are found in depressions or these pits. Now, what happens is that these pits, mashimo, they accumulate a lot of water vapor. So essentially, by accumulating the water vapor, they are going to reduce the concentration gradient. Let's pause there. When talking about water vapor moving from within the plant to the outside of the plant, we need to have a concentration gradient. So concentration gradient simply refers to a difference in the amount of molecules between two areas. So if we want water molecules to diffuse from point A to point B, we need to have a difference in the amount of water vapor. Now, if you have a greater concentration gradient, the rate at which transpiration occurs is going to be faster. So essentially what the sunken stomata do that is by accumulating the water vapor, they reduce the concentration gradient. So you have a lot of water vapor within the leaf, and at the same time you also have a lot of water vapor outside the leaf surrounding the stomata. So as you can imagine, this reduces the concentration gradient and essentially reduces the rate of transpiration. So as mentioned before, this is an adaptation that is found in plants that grow in desert areas. So by doing so, they reduce the rate of transpiration and therefore reduce the amount of water that is lost. Now, up to this point, I'm going to pause on the structural factors and discuss a few physiological factors with regards to stomata. So when we talk about physiological factors, we simply mean certain factors or certain ways in which the plants function that tend to reduce the rate of transpiration through stomata. Now, when talking about stomata, in most plants, they tend to open during the day and close at night. Of course, this is to allow the fusion of carbon dioxide, therefore photosynthesis, to take place. But you'll find that in certain plants that are found in desert areas, they have a reversed stomatal rhythm. It's the reverse of it. So instead of opening during the day, they close them during the day and open at night. So during the day, the stomata are closed, and at night is when the stomata are open. And the reason for this is because during the night, the temperatures tend to be lower. So when the temperatures are lower, that means that the rate of transpiration is also low. So in short, when they open them at night, they can carry out gaseous exchange and at the same time reduce the amount of water vapor that they lose. How cool is that? Now moving on to another physiological factor with regards to osmosis, and that is midday closure. Now you'll find that when it comes to certain plants, during hot days, hot dry seasons, and it's the middle of the day, they tend to close their stomata. And this is known as midday closure. And of course, the reason why they close their stomata is so as by closing the stomata, they're reducing the amount of water vapor that is lost through them. So this is known as midday closure. So those are two physiological factors relating to transpiration. Now let's move on to another structural factor. And these are hair leaves. Now, some plants have leaves that have these tiny hairs on their surface. Now, I know you're probably thinking, hairs on the surface of leaves. Now, when it comes to hairs in biology, it doesn't mean the hairs as we're used to, body hair. No, it simply means that they have structures that are thin and elongated, such as in the case of our hair. So, some plants have these thin, long structures that are found on the surface of their leaf. Now, these are what are termed as hairy leaves. Now, the hairs trap a layer of moist air. So what they do is that by trapping the layer of moist air, they are reducing the concentration gradient. Remember, when talking about transpiration, we are talking about movement of water vapor from within the leaf through openings into the surrounding. So essentially what they're doing is that by having a layer of moist air on the outer surface of the stomata, they are decreasing the concentration gradient. So you're going to have a situation whereby you have a lot of water vapor within the leaf, a lot of water vapor outside. So the amount of water vapor that is lost is going to be low, and therefore the rate of transpiration is also going to be less. Now, moving on to another one, glossy leaves. Now, some plants have a shiny layer of cuticle that is found on the surface of the leaf. So what happens is that this shiny cuticle reflects the light. Now, by reflecting the light, they prevent internal heating of the leaf and therefore reducing the rate of transpiration. Okay, let me break it down. When you are exposed to the sun, yes, you are going to have light energy, but at the same time, you're also going to have heat energy. So when leaves are exposed to the sun, you find that by absorbing heat energy from the sun, it increases the internal temperature of the leaves. So by doing so, it also increases the amount of water vapor that is lost by the plants, by the leaves. So this increases the rate of transpiration. Now, if you have plants that grow in areas where water is already scarce, they cannot have this. So what they do have is they have a shiny layer of cuticle. So the shiny cuticle reflects light, and by doing so, they reduce the internal heating of the leaf and therefore reduce the rate of transpiration. Can you imagine? I just want you to pause and think about how versatile plants are. You know, the adaptations that are found in plants are so very diverse, depending on the conditions that are present where the plant grows. How amazing are these organisms?